All right.
Yeah.
So first of
Okay.
all, wait, okay, hang on. So you're at the deer camp now.
Yeah. So my
At
deer camp
my
is
deer camp. Yeah.
so North Louisiana. My deer camp is 100-year-old pier and beam high school that was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps
Oh yeah,
in the mid
buddy.
1930s.
That's
So first
yeah.
of all, if you want to play basketball, I got you, fam.
Of course. Yeah, right. Yep.
Yeah. And
Like
then,
most deer camps,
like most deer camps, yeah, full
right?
basketball gym.
Uh-huh.
And then we've got all of the cool stuff in the back.
Nice. Yeah,
You
yeah,
got
yeah.
Bruce the Moose, not
Nice,
from Louisiana.
nice, nice, nice.
And then I am now here in the kitchen
Oh yeah.
doing all this. So yeah. Doing pastor stuff in the camp this week.
Yeah, that's exactly right. As I told the boss on Twitter this morning, this is what we call a little documentary filmmaking. So
Yeah.
people can't I am just uh squatted in the parking lot here at our church with the ring light that we use to film stuff. So I look like a total just just a dum dum. But here we are, man. We're making this happen. So listen, are you hunting? Are you actively hunting this week? Is the
Yeah.
hope anyway.
Yes.
Nice, nice, nice,
Yeah. I was out this morning. I will go back out mid afternoon
nice.
and getting a few days in here. So
Yeah, yeah. So
but yeah.
prayers up for y'all's Thanksgiving, obviously, because I mean that's
Well, yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's what we want to see. And then so it's a weird week, right? Because it's ministry. It's a weird ministry week. It's always strange,
Yeah.
taking some time off. So that's always weird. And we just did a newcomers event, newcomers lunch at the church this last week. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I bet Chad's got some ideas on how to fix. So I've got two questions. I've got two quick questions, and then I have to literally go inside and get stuff done. And you've got to go get meat. So we got two questions. Question number one is, so you're doing, and I know because you've written about this. You as I'm thinking about how to do something for newcomers at our church, what are some things I should be thinking about? What are some ways that I could screw that up?
Yeah. So a couple of things. And I was literally where I looked at my phone and realized, okay, I got to jump on this call. Was thinking through some of these things for a project I have for I've got a stupid goal in 2025 that I'm not sharing yet. But I was thinking through some newcomer stuff. And this is one of the things for the average church, I call it relational capacity.
Mhm.
And what that means is, a church, any church system has a ceiling to the amount of new relationships that it can actually have inside.
Sure, sure.
Okay. So like one of the difficult things is like if your church, if you see new people show up a lot and those new people will come and they'll be there on Sunday morning and they might even last a year or so on Sunday morning, but they never get plugged into anything else.
Right.
There's two red flags should be going off. Number one, what are your integration systems looking like? Are you actually trying to fully integrate them into the life of the church as active adults?
Hmm.
Or sometimes there might just not be any space for them. And what that means is, like, I always ask churches I'm working with them because I'm a full-time developer now.
Right.
When was the last time you started a new group or a new ministry? Because, in a lot of established churches, um,
Here's the things
we
we
had
do.
a fantastic, yeah, there's the things we do.
Right.
And we, like the last church I served, we started a men's ministry event, took place once a month. And it was literally supposed to be a connecting event. But the problem we had was this was a church primarily of older folks in their 60s or so. Those men meetings, it was supposed to be a high relational thing. And I would share for like 10
Right.
minutes. But
Right.
besides the rest of it, like if you didn't go to their tiny little high school between like 1968 and 1975, there was
Yeah.
nothing to talk about because all they did was just class reunion kind of stuff. And we had a lot of people come into that event. They would come to church on Sunday, not that regularly, but they never would get plugged in anywhere else. And I would get them to that men's meeting, and they would never come back to the men's meeting. And like I brought my father-in-law one time to it. They didn't live in the town. They were visiting. He was their age. He's a riot to hang out with and talk with. And he can make a friend with like a telephone pole. And we were
And he
driving back
bounced
from
a
the
little bit.
church, and he said, yeah. And he said, Chad, I could not get a word in. I had no idea what they were talking about the entire time. So like, that's an example. Like, that church's relational capacity was actually really, really low. And so with newcomers events, and I'm a big fan of having a recurring newcomer event. My last full-time church, we did it 9 times a year. Like every 6 weeks, took off December, took off in the summer a little bit, but pretty much happened 9 times a year. And our goal with that newcomers event was all it was 2 things. One was to connect them to more people. And so our whole integration system was designed around like every time you came, it wasn't you hear from me more or we invite you to more things. It was, okay, we're going to try to connect you with a different person. So like they connect with me on the first event, the first time they attend. And then we also did what we call an organizational contact. Because how many times in normal sized churches, the pastor is running all the integration, and when the pastor makes their first contact, all they do is talk about organizational stuff. Like, you can come to this event. This is our kids' info. Like, boom, 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 all this kind of stuff. They never establish a pastoral relationship. So I'm a big fan of, like, if somebody comes to church for the first time, the pastor responds pastorally. And I found the sneaky sauce in that is a text message or an email on Monday morning. You thank them for worshiping, and then you ask them, how can I pray for you? I'm praying for you this week. Is there anything specific? Please let me know. So you automatically introduce that pastoral relational contact. Second visit, if they've got kids, if they got teens, something like that, then you connect them to another leader inside of that group. On that second visit, you then invite them to whatever this welcome to church thing that you run multiple times a year is. The third visit, you want to make sure you've got their full stack of contact, name, email address, cell phone number, mailing address. And then getting that mailing address is crucial. That's when you send them a really solid paper invite. And the only thing is that welcome to church event. And so the only really, besides relational contacts, the only information you're dumping on them is that welcome to church event. And that welcome to church event is there. And I like a 50-50 ratio almost of staff and leaders and new people that are there. And unless you're in like a major metro area like you are, like how many did y'all have at y'all's event last night?
Oh, we had this was on Sunday afternoon, and I think we almost hit that 50-50, which we were a little feeling like maybe it's overwhelming people, but those people that came showed up. So we were right about that. We had a couple of elders and their wives, and then a couple, 2-3 couples that are new age to the church.
Yeah. And so there's that thing of like, okay, we're just connecting to more relationships. And then I feel like if a church is seeing a healthy amount of visitors, and they typically are saying, 5% of your Sunday attendance needs to be new people to have kind of a healthy visitor culture. You probably need to be starting some sort of new group or new ministry opportunity like that, like 3 times a year. And one of the things that we did was very helpful was the big invite at our Welcome to Church event. Our church did a thing called dinner clubs, which was always a riot and always tons of fun. Was we would form up a dinner club just for the people in that event. And we would attach, 2 or 3 other known leaders into the church to lead that dinner club. So it was always new things. And that's the deal. It's like the biggest thing I think with the visitor stuff is, you don't want new people to ever feel like they can't get any relationships formed and that there's not relational space for them. So like that's the way I like to think about those because, I don't know about you, but in my context, so many times you'll have somebody come to church 2 or 3 times. The church finds out they have a finance background or some sort of a construction or facilities background. And next thing you know, they're asking to be on the finance committee. Like it's a horrible, horrible thing to ask people early on to try to integrate these very high level and high investment skills when their investment into the church is actually like right here.
Yeah, and you don't know
And
folks,
so
right? So you want people to feel like they're getting to actually know people. And that's one thing that we've been talking about trying to do is like how can we make sure that we're not just, like you said, inviting people to things just so that they can participate in the things, and it becomes really mechanical if you're not careful. And that's
yeah,
honestly one of the reasons why I think a lot of pastors, maybe this is speaking from my background, but I think a lot of pastors avoid some of this stuff is because they think it's mechanical, because it's this idea of, well, if I approach this person, then I'm making them the hard sell on this so I can get them to this event, and it feels really gross. Like you're like, oh, that's not ministry,
yeah,
right? But I think we've found that if you don't have some sort of system, then people just float around and no one talks to them, and they feel bad. Like they don't feel like
yeah,
anybody like cared enough to like invite them to something, and they don't feel blessed by that relational freeness. They kind of feel like, oh, dude, I guess
yeah,
nobody cares about new people here.
yeah. Well, like it's the sweet spot is, so much of what I do now is working with normal sized churches to understand sustainable growth. So, these are
Right.
churches of 80 or 90, and they may or may not be at that position of, if we don't grow, we're going to die.
Right.
Um, and there's a category of churches that grow that I call intentionally evangelistic, and the healthy ones have a solid front door, or probably multiple solid front doors to the church,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got all the back doors closed.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Right.
way you close all those back doors is your relational management. And I'm an extrovert. I'm like a super extrovert. One of my high level strengths and Clifton strengths is woo. Like I can collect people like nobody's business. But an unhealthy church with that type of culture and with a leader who might have those predispositions, if they're not aware of it, is they might have wide open front doors. They also have wide open back doors. And so, like, I think
Right.
it's also important for churches. You need to be tracking who's coming to your church. I love to use Trello for this so it can be visual. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
find out the average tenure of anybody in your congregation is 12 to 18 months, you have a problem. And you
Mm-hmm.
can't track that if you're not aware of, when are people coming in. If you have a solid integration system that you can actually see and manage,
Mm-hmm.
and you realize where those danger zones might be, like how often, like what's the like if a person comes to your church for their first visit and their second visit's not for their 6 weeks, like you've got some problems with your first time, your follow-up sequence on your first thing. But if someone comes to your church for 6 months and never really gets plugged in, they're going to drop off. Like that 6 month drop off is a legitimate thing. I think there's one at 12 months. I think there's one like 18 months. And this sounds silly, but like I've been in a fast growing church before that, you know, went from a church plant in a community of 6,000 from like 5 families to 300 people on Sunday morning in 2.5 years. And when I look back through all of our visitors over the course of like 8 years, post COVID, we were running 175. But we'd had over 2,300 people come through the doors of that church.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were some significant backdoor issues that, 10 years ago, or if Chad 10 years ago knew what Chad knows now, hopefully we could have closed some of those out. But,
Yeah.
I think for anybody who doesn't realize the power of systems in that scenario, you know, you, you know, as extroverted as I am, I can take care of about 50 people.
So that was going to
That's
be
my
my next question,
bandwidth.
right? Is like, okay, that was going to be my next question. Is like, okay, so a lot of people hear this and they're like, okay, that's fun and dandy. Like, yeah, I would love to do that. I would love to be doing a better job of getting connected to people. But like, it's just me, or it's just the two of us, or it's just our three
Yeah.
people in this field, like whatever the situation is. So this is maybe an oddball because I think we're hacking now a little bit what the intent of the system is so far. Although I know that we've got some plans on certain things, but like, what is a way that you could use Pulpit for this? If I'm thinking like, okay,
Yeah.
I wanna automate some of this or create systems around some of this, and I'm specifically thinking towards like content, like
Yeah.
how can I make sure that I'm actually reaching people with in a way that doesn't feel robotic, right? But it's also not
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
I can just like manually do every time. Do you have like any? Because I was trying to think about
Yeah.
this when we were talking about this.
So I think a couple of things. I think one, after you've been at any church for like 6 months, you will start to get those sermons that just like, okay, this is hitting the nail on the head. Like these are solid. This
Uh-huh.
is resonating with my community, my context. Throw that sermon into Pulpit. And,
Right.
or if it was a series, especially like
Right.
a very felt need type series, throw it into Pulpit, start asking the AI chat the questions. And I think that what my recommendation would be is at some point in time, and I think you need to probably send this email out to your whole church every 3 months. But that's why I love I know MailChimp and Constant Contact started the game off, but I think go into Beehive, go to Kit. I'm a big fan of Kit. Create some 5-7 day email sequences that are you
Uh-huh.
know that are hitting that felt need, hitting those big questions. And I've done it before. You drop a sermon in the Pulpit, like, hey, I want to create a 5-day email sequence based off of, first I would go in and say, hey, give me the top 5 best nuggets ideas from this sermon. Or if you just play around the chat, a certain word keeps coming up a bunch. Okay, then pop into it. Say, okay, give me. I can't remember. I've talked about this before talking with you. I did a Song of Songs series several years ago that was a great, great series. But I talked about this idea that was intentional on the first week. And it started trickling into the rest of the sermon series that was talking about Song of Songs being about singularity, about singularity of relationships and focus. And Pulpit, the first time I ever tried the tool, ever, a year and a half ago, that was one of the first sermons I plugged into it. And it was pulling all the singularity information out of it. So, okay, give me 5 emails I can write about having singularity in our life.
Uh-huh.
Go in, write those, and imagine you have a backlog of like 5 to 6 of those little short week-long sequences. You get an email every morning at
Right.
6 a.m. Doing an email to your whole congregation a couple of times, every 3 months, said, hey, have you seen these resources we've created in our church? All you have to, that's what I love about Kit. Hey, if you're interested in this, just click on the link and we'll add you to the list and you'll start getting them tomorrow. I think that also begins building up a depth of your ministry context and the ways that you're going to talk about things, the ways that you might be different from some other church down the street. Or hopefully this is a person who's never encountered church before and for some odd reason
Right.
has felt, welcome and safe enough to show up at your place, and they're pulling into that. It's like, that's one way I would go in and use the tool, is really to think about how you can use Pulpit to develop, intentional email sequences. I've also seen some churches geotag around their community and then have Facebook ads that are a super, super felt need.
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
And you build it all off. And I would say start with your sermons, because your sermons are the things that are developing the primary theological content
Right.
of your church. It's the best thing you can do. So that's kind of that was the tip that I really would have about using Pulpit for this sort of thing.
That's different than I was anticipating. But I like that, because it's like you're not you don't want to, and this is an old Chuck Smith ism, right? Where he's like, look, you don't want to, what you do to attract people is what you're going to have to do to maintain that growth.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So it's
Exactly.
like, if what you're doing is you're marketing, for lack of a less crappy term, but if you're going out there and saying, hey, you should come to our church because, and the answer isn't the thing that you're basically going to do all the time, then
Yeah.
there's going to be a
That's just who you
mismatch where
are.
people are going to show up with this weird expectation of like, oh, well, they said that I should come to this church because there's this. And mostly what they're doing is just teaching these sermons about, these
Yeah.
felt needs that are in my life, and connecting me to the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're drawing people with that. It's saying, hey, at our church, this is what we've been pouring all of our attention, our focus into, is we're coming
Yeah.
together, we're hearing from the word, and then we're applying that to our lives, and we're getting connected to each other. And if
Yeah.
you can kind of advertise that, for lack of a better term, like, this is the kind of stuff we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think
and then
that
do that in a
some
way
of
that,
that, so yeah, it's
huh,
like, you can get donuts anywhere.
right.
You can get donuts anywhere. Now, what might be interesting, and I'm literally coming up with this as I talk to you, what might be interesting is to come up with a prompt that, just literally say, like, what are the top 3 unique theological applications from this message? And every Sunday after you run the sermon, ask it the exact same prompt and then like go create a Notion database and copy paste every single prompt into its own file. And then tag them. And then, in some ways, what you're doing, you're letting Pulpit do the background work. It's like after 3 to 6 months, you might have a pretty different outlook on things. This pulls into Tim Keller's whole idea of a theological vision for the city. And I talk about this a lot when I say there's hard edge churches and there's soft edge churches. A hard edge church is a fairly generic experience. They're going to be singing the same songs everybody else does. It's going to look like it's the church industrial complex. And depending on the size of your community, that hard edge church can be different sizes, but it's like, like and this is what makes me sad is when I see, a normal sized church trying to compete with another one of my categories of churches that grow. I call it the big church down the street. They're just like a subpar version. You're never going to out big church down the street, the big church down the street. A soft edge church has the ability, like, can you imagine this in a 2-dimensional frame, like a big square, and you got all these different size rectangles and squares. Soft edge churches are not going to be squares. They're going to move into these unique pockets in the community that no other church is actually reaching. And you could probably do some deductive work with Pulpit over the course of 3 to 6 months to hear what are the things that you natively are speaking about that might be in a different way, and to know and imagine what would happen if you had 6 to 9 months of data of that exact same prompt pulled out in 6 to 9 months worth of sermons. It can help you understand that. And I think there you could be a lot more honest in some of those marketing keywords along the lines of the stuff that you were talking about. Because like I said, you can get a donut anywhere. But I pastored a church, the church we started. I never could have anticipated this, but I'm married, been married for 20 years. We don't have kids. I'm also United Methodist. I grew up Baptist, but it was not because of that, but it was because since I didn't have kids, I don't think I've ever preached a sermon on parenting, because it was like, okay, I don't have that. But so we found out at the church over the course of several years, we had a lot of single moms in the church. An inordinate way. And I asked one time, I said, hey, listen, there's a bunch of single moms. Can you help me understand why that might be? And she said, I can tell you exactly why it is. And I was like, well, why is it? And she said, I tried so many different churches, and every church, every week I heard, man, you need to do this to your kids. Like, you need to raise up your children right. And she said, it was odd because like her son is like 7, literally looked at her at church one day, and another church said, Mom, I don't have a dad. Can you do that for me? And so like, I was like, wow, because I don't have kids and I'm not going to speak into that idea. We inadvertently became known in our community as we're a great church for single moms. And so that was a unique finding. But I think that if you pull into, letting the tool help you understand some of your unique core convictions and core application processes, you probably can find those areas of uniqueness that you could then use in more, I'm going to say traditional, but like it's only like the last 10 or 15 years, but like your social media marketing, maybe.
Yeah, no, for sure. And all, just being yourself, finding out who you are and where the Lord has placed you so that you can be yourself, on steroids a little bit, which I think is like always a better way of doing it than trying to be somebody else. We talk about that all the time, actually, at our church. It's like we're intentionally trying to, at this point, at this stage in our growth, we are intentionally we've just graduated from maybe small rowboat, but we're into the bass boat stage. We're certainly not some sort of yacht. So it's like, hey, let's do what we're doing. We can go different places that other people can't go. Let's do that rather than trying to, pretend to be somebody we're not. Well, listen, Chad, you've got deer to hunt. I've got to go make some food. And it's getting a little chilly out here. But man, I'm literally just gonna clip this entire thing and just use it for me. I would do that whether or not we post it or not. So this little show is performing admirably its one real secret goal, which is just getting me a bunch of intelligent information that I can go plug in for ministry. I hope some of y'all listen to this, but that's all just fringe benefit. So thanks so much, man. Good luck out there.
See you next time.
All right, thanks, boss. Bye.